In 2017, in the mountains of Peru, local peasants discovered unusual mummies in one of the caves near the Nazca Plateau. These creatures had three-fingered limbs, different joint structures, skulls, and internal organs. Dmitry Galetsky, a candidate of medical sciences and associate professor at the Department of Maxillofacial Surgery and Stomatology of the First Pavlov State Medical University of St. Petersburg, conducted research on these mummies and gave an exclusive interview to the Alatra TV channel. He said, "Such mummies are rarely seen. Previously, there had been information in the press about similar findings, but they were handed over to the government and disappeared. However, these mummies received some publicity for the first time. It was interesting to determine the truth and explore the anatomy, which fundamentally differs from what exists in our surrounding world." The Russian scientist was part of a large group of experts from the United States, France, Mexico, and Peru. He personally saw the remains of these mummies, and the first thing that caught his attention upon arriving in Peru was the presence of three-fingered beings in the everyday objects of the local inhabitants. When the mummies were discovered, the expert group considered conducting various examinations such as X-rays, computer tomography, CT, and so on. The scientists then proceeded to study the tomography of these mummies, which were named Maria Wojita and Josefina. In addition to them, a vast number of mummies of small creatures were found, totaling at least 6. Heads and incomprehensible human-like beings were also discovered. In the laboratory of academician A. Baranov, the DNA analysis of Maria and Wojita's mummies revealed that they did not belong to Homo sapiens. It was also determined that they were not animals but humanoid beings, suggesting that they could indeed be extraterrestrial. Maria, measuring 167 centimeters in height, was the largest among them. She resembled a human, but her distinguishing features were the three-fingered hands and feet. Most likely, she couldn't spread her fingers apart, but she could grasp something by flexing her hand, meaning that she had prehensile movements without spreading the fingers in different directions, said Galetsky. Interestingly, she had 4 phalanges, unlike us. Another intriguing aspect is that when researchers photographed the fingerprints on her foot, the lines were horizontal instead of radial as in our case. In the area of the heel, humans have a heel bone prominence, but Maria did not. The next mummy, which is the most interesting one, is Josefina. Measuring 60 to 62 cm, she is a representative of the small three-fingered mummies. In representatives of this group, the opening in the skull through which the spinal cord passes is not located at the back, like in our case, but in the middle, and it has a square cross-section. Representatives of the Josephine group also have a unique convergence of their clavicles. In the absence of the sternum, the clavicles converge at an angle in the front section, forming a keel-like structure. Images of such keels have been found on stone structures in Mexico. By the way, in Mexico, at El Toro, very interesting stones with images of extraterrestrials were discovered. It is difficult to determine their purpose, but they are fascinating artifacts, which we will showcase at the end of the video. Members of the Josephine group also have 3 fingers on their hands and feet. They have only 1 bone in the forearm and in the shin as well. In addition to that, they have a very distinctive structure of the chest. Their ribs are circular, and they have a fairly long neck with unique vertebrae. Externally, the mummies differ in their facial features. There are distinct slit-like protrusions on the base of their skulls, which are absent in humans. During the examination of the mummies, eye sockets and facial muscles were discovered. The eye sockets contain the optic nerve channel. There are also intriguing openings above the eye area, and the nasal cavity extends into the cranial cavity, rather than being hollow. The cervical region also significantly differs, with no other species, including animals and humans, having such a structure. The thoracic region is represented by ribs that do not converge at the sternum like ours, but instead have a circular shape. The pelvic region of these beings is also quite peculiar. In Josephine, the pelvic bones are vertically positioned, while in Albert, they have a slight tilt. In the image on the right, we can observe a mummy with pelvic bones inclined at a 45-degree angle. The internal organ structure is also interesting, resembling loops. It is unclear for what purpose these loops exist and what processes they were involved in. whether they are vessels or some additional organs. As we can see from the evidence presented by Dmitry Gillespie, the biomechanics of these creatures are undoubtedly different. While the mummies Maria and Lolita share some genetic similarity to human genetic material, Josephine and other mummies are entirely dissimilar. But the most intriguing part is the story he shared. When we were in Mexico, I became acquainted with a culture that originated from El Toro, the images of flying objects that arrived on Earth, and some biological material that was transmitted on the flying saucers. I was curious, since such artifacts are being found, they should surely be in official and state museums. We went to the Central Museum in Mexico, but there was nothing to be found anywhere. I spoke with priests, and I was interested in their opinion on this matter. They said, "You see, our people are not yet ready for this information. We waited for a response from a Catholic church when we found these mummies, but there was no reaction at all, and that is also very strange. In principle, if there is an acknowledgement that they existed, and that Maria is a biological entity with an altered genetic code that may have been modified not on Earth, then we will have to completely revise the entire history of Earth, including the Bible perhaps. This is a very slippery, dangerous question, and not everyone is ready for it. Maybe that's why they are not in a hurry to showcase these mummies and everything else of that nature." While studying this topic, I would like to share a story related to these mummies. As soon as this information reached the media, specialists emerged who scientifically argued that the mummies were fake. One of them was Stanislav Drobiszewski. After examining the X-ray image of Maria's foot, he noticed that the joint surfaces of the limbs did not align, leading him to conclude that the three-toe feature was fake. He was seconded by Michael David, his colleague from the Western Front, who also believed that the mummies were made from bone fragments. A memorandum was drafted, where the participants of the 9th Annual Congress on Mummy Research, by a majority vote, concluded that the mummies were created in modern times from real ancient remains of adults, children, and animals. They titled this document, "Deception with Extraterrestrial Mummies." However, Russian scientist Konstantin Kurakov, a professor at the ITMO National Research University in St. Petersburg, who also participated in the examination of these mummies, took tissue samples from the mummy's body and its fingers and organized a comparative analysis in St. Petersburg. The results showed that their chemical composition was identical, contradicting the opponent's claim that the fingers were assembled. This finding preceded the DNA analysis, which we mentioned earlier and which confirms the authenticity of the mummies. Peruvian surgeon Edson Vivanco, who was one of those who personally saw these mummies and participated in their examination, is convinced that the mummies are genuine. In an interview with the British newspaper Daily Express, he stated that neither he nor his colleagues found any evidence of surgical interventions on the mummies. In general, those scientists who worked with the mummies firsthand claim their authenticity, while those who study them through X-ray images reject their authenticity. The majority of scientists, however, remain silent on the matter. Lastly, I want to mention a few small mummies found in the southern part of the Atacama Desert in Peru. For several years, experts have been trying to determine the affiliation of these creatures to any known species. During the initial examination, experts noted that these specimens resemble humans in all major characteristics. However, there are differences. The skin of these creatures has a grayish hue, and the mummies measure 20 centimeters in height with bone density of 5 mol. After the external examination of the fossils, they were sent to a local research center. During the scanning, it was revealed that the skeleton of the small humanoid is nearly identical to that of human. However, the creature's arms and legs have a more elongated appearance compared to Homo sapiens. The X-ray also showed that the mummy has only 3 ribs on each side and 3 fingers on each limb. Currently, scientists have collected all the necessary materials for DNA testing. They have refrained from making bold statements as the results are unknown. That concludes my presentation. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with new content. Until next time.